You will know that this is here yesterday. I was pleased to see that the agreements reached so far at this conference were adopted by consensus. I do think that this is a testament to the collegiate and constructive spirit of cooperation that I have witnessed throughout this COP, and I want to thank you. And as we proceed through this critical day, I request that you continue in the same positive spirit which has delivered real results so far. Facilitating ministers work late in the night to address key issues, including on finance and loss and damage. And my team and I, supported by the Secretary, worked throughout the night to further develop the tests that were issued this morning. I do believe that these tests are the product of a transparent, inclusive, and party-driven process. And in my view, they do bring us another step closer towards a comprehensive, ambitious, and balanced set of outcomes, which I hope Parliament will adopt by consensus at the close of play today. We have made a lot of progress, and I'm grateful for the accelerated efforts on finance, in particular after I shared my concerns with you all yesterday morning on the slow pace at which these discussions have been moving. But as you can see, the texts that have been put forward are not yet totally clear. Brackets or options have been retained where there was not sufficient clarity on the way forward. And this is despite the extensive discussions in the negotiating rooms and my team and I bilateral engagement today. Across the full suite of the draft decisions, a small number of key issues remain which require our urgent collective attention. And on these key issues, my ministry co-facilitators and I simply did not have sufficient clarity on the way forward that would enjoy broad consensus. And that is the purpose of this plenary today, to hear from you on the solutions that you have refined together overnight, which would allow us to finalize our work here in Glasgow. And I also want to receive your guidance on how best to proceed. So friends, it's now early Friday afternoon, and as you know, it has been my sincere intention throughout COP26 to bring this conference to a smooth and orderly close at the end of today. Well friends, today has now come, and I need your pragmatic and workable solutions to now also come forward so we can close off our work successfully. We have come a long way over the past 2 weeks, and now we need that final injection of that can-do spirit which is present at this COP, so that we get this shared endeavour over the line. And I now call on parties which wish to make interventions to identify themselves. However, I humbly request, dear colleagues, that in the interest of time and efficiency, we refrain from making general statements. What would be most useful is if you could focus your interventions on providing consensus solutions to those key outstanding issues, raising any specific material concerns with the wider text. And please, for everyone to have time to speak, be brief, and you know that we have a lot more work to do after this plenary. With that, my friends, I open the floor. So I see that the Russian Federation is seeking the floor. I now give the floor to the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Уважаемый господин Шарпов, дамы и господа, прежде всего хотел бы поблагодарить председателя конференции сторон за большую проделанную работу по подготовке основных решений.
Distinguished President Sharma and Ms. Minosa, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank the President of COP for the tremendous work that was done to prepare the coming decisions.
Мировое сообщество ждет от нас конкретного, осязаемого результата, который позволит операционализировать прежде всего Парижское соглашение. Кроме того, мы должны послать четкий сигнал о дальнейших шагах, которые предполагается предпринять совместно для продвижения климатической проблематики. Вместе с тем, наши сигналы должны основываться на реальных возможностях.
The global community expects us to show specific, tangible results that would allow to operationalize first and foremost the Paris Agreement. Besides, we need to show a clear signal on the further steps that we're intending to undertake jointly to promote the climate agenda. At the same time, our signals should be based on our real capacities.
Отмечаем взвешенный характер и завершенный вид проекта и нового решения, который отвечает нашим общим ожиданиям. Представленные меры, в том числе по общим временным рамкам, позволяют достичь крупного баланса между поступательным повышением климатической амбициозности и обеспечением главного экономического перехода с выполнением целей устойчивого развития ООН.
We'd like to take note of the well-balanced nature and the well-rounded nature of the draft outcome decision that is in line with our common expectations. The measures presented, including on the common timeframes, allow to strike a delicate balance between consistent increase of climate ambitiousness and ensuring a smooth economic transition while executing the SDGs.
Позиция Российской Федерации заключается в необходимости создания надежных, предсказуемых и эффективных инструментов.
The position of the Russian Federation is that there is a need to create reliable, predictable, and effective instruments for international cooperation to prevent climate change.
При этом текущая версия текста по рыночным и нерыночным механизмам статьи 6 нуждается в дополнительной проработке по вопросу о корректировках, отмечаем высокий потенциал предложенного варианта решения на основе авторизации как основы для процесса.
At the same time, the current version of the text on market and non-market mechanisms of the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement requires additional elaboration. On the matter of adjustments, we take note of the high potential of the proposed solution using authorization as the basis for further progress.
В то же время выражаем обеспокоенность отсутствием консенсуса по базовым линиям, лимитам на передачу, использование единиц и общего сокращения глобальных выбросов полигонных газов.
At the same time, we would like to express our concern that there is no consensus on the baseline, limits to transfer and use of units, and overall mitigation of global emissions.
По вопросам открыты для дальнейшему диалогу и поиску решений с учетом необходимости скорейшего принятия правильной реализации Парижского соглашения.
We're open to further dialogue and finding solutions, considering the need to adopt the rule of Paris Agreement as soon as possible.
По вопросам отчетности отмечаем необходимость получения надежных и развернутых данных по мерам борьбы с изменением климата, обеспечения гибкости для отдельных стран и должно снижать качество получаемых данных.
As for reporting, we highlight the need to acquire reliable and detailed data on the measures to fight climate change. Ensuring flexibility for certain countries should not bring down the quality of the acquired data.
С учетом ответственности перед миром и, к сожалению, не всегда позитивного опыта последних лет переговоров, призываю отнестись к представленным документам конструктивно во имя достижения серьезных результатов на данной конференции.
Considering that we bear responsibility for the whole world, and unfortunately, our experience hasn't always been positive for the past years in the negotiations, I call upon everyone to treat the documents presented constructively in the name of achieving serious results at this COP.
Отсутствие прогресса сегодня может замедлить климатические действия. Именно поэтому всем нам предстоит пойти на определенные уступки и не затягивать дискуссию вокруг ключевых моментов переговорного процесса.
No progress today might slow down climate action. That is why all of us today will have to make certain concessions and not to drag out the discussion about the key issues in the negotiation process. Thank you.
Thank you to the intervention from the Russian Federation. I see that the Republic of Korea has seized the floor. I give the floor to the Republic of Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We very appreciate the excellent work done by the UK presidency to bring up with this new text. I strongly believe that we are very close. We are very close to the consensus. Therefore, I'm pretty confident that we can complete our task by today. Upon your request, I would like to mention in a very concrete way. So regarding the COP decision, paragraph 68, in order to strengthen the clarity, I'd like to make a small suggestion. And the second line, it will be read to facilitate the organization of annual youth climate forum or dialogue between parties and youth. So if we can change the phrase, as I just mentioned, we can get more clarity that youth climate forum will be organized every year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention from Korea. Canada seeks the floor. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for your leadership throughout these 2 weeks. As many of you would know, my country has not always been exemplary in these halls and in these negotiations, but this has started changing a few years ago. And now in Canada, we have one of the most ambitious carbon pricing systems in the world, but it's not enough. We are investing record level of money in public transit, electrification, and active transportation, but it's not enough. We've put in place new regulations to reduce methane emissions, but it's not enough. We've doubled our climate finance commitment, but it's not enough. In essence, my country is the very incarnation. While we need strong language in this text on all 3 pillars of the Paris Agreement, and we need and support a forceful text on keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius alive, because it's our best collective effort. We also think that on loss and damages, the conversations that were happening last night are not exactly reflected in the text, and we believe that there is a landing zone on which all of us could agree. We also agree that on SDRs is perhaps a path forward, but as long as it's not done, it must be additional to what donor countries are already doing and should not be a substitute for our climate finance commitment. And lastly, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say that Canada strongly supports strong languages on the rights of Indigenous peoples and the inclusion of their traditional knowledge in the fight against climate change, as well as the protection of human rights as part of this text. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much for that intervention from Canada. Norway is seeking the floor. I give the floor to Norway.
Thank you, Alok. Thank you, Co-President. This cover decision is our statement to the world, and the world is watching us. It needs to be strong, it needs to be ambitious, and it needs to be clear. There must be no doubt that it leaves a strong impression that we sincerely aim to keep 1.5 degrees alive, and that must flow, from that must flow the clear ambition level of what to do about it. So ambition must be the essence. The text must not be too long and complicated. It needs to be very strong on mitigation efforts. We know that we have to act in the 2020s, otherwise adaptation will simply be way too costly for many of the nations assembled here. We strongly support language on scaling and finance, and we support strong language on loss and damage. We would like to see even better formulations or further formulations on nature-based solutions and SIMs and ecosystems. We welcome the focus on phasing out the fossil fuel subsidies. We would prefer if insufficient was deleted, but at least what is in there now has to be kept. And I will also join Canada in their emphasis on human rights and indigenous people. The world is watching us, and we cannot let them down today. We really have to come out with a key message. This is the most essential part of the work we're doing here today.
Thank you, Norway, for your intervention. Thank you, Norway, for your intervention. Papua New Guinea seeks the floor. I give the floor to Papua New Guinea.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also want to thank you for your excellent work
team that supports you. We feel we're very close. We can reach our goals. We can send the appropriate message globally that the world is serious about solving this problem. However, we have to do that in a manner that is equitable. And in this case, we're a little bit concerned as it relates to pre-2020. The current text seems to leave small island states and LDCs without credit for the work they've done to contribute to global climate stability prior to 2020. And instead, is benefiting countries with the most capacity and the most wealth. In that context, we would just like to propose a simple fix that when it comes to forests and when it comes to CPM, we think that should be financed through public finance rather than from markets. But if there is an accommodation for markets, there needs to be a single thing for both pre-2020 credits.
Thank you, again, for your intervention. I now give the floor to Group.
Thank you, Mr. President. Peru has the honor to speak, to deliver this statement on behalf of ILAC. Let me begin by associating our comments to the statement that will be delivered by the distinguished representative of Guinea on behalf of the Group of 77 in China. At the outset, ILAC wishes to express its most sincere appreciation for the leadership you have shown, together with the facilitating ministers. The manner in which you have led our work over the last few days is a testament to the concern and commitment that we all have to find a collective way forward. For ILAC, coherence with 1.5 is the guiding criteria, the ultimate test of the adequacy of any and every decision we will take here in Glasgow. In this spirit, ILAC appreciates the UK presidency's efforts in providing for an inclusive process to formulate the decisions of the Glasgow Climate Conference. So we will now go to some specific items that you have just requested. The text of the cover decisions is improved, but still not perfect. We have elaborated extensively in our expectation for true ambition, for the highest level of ambition. We understand that a balance must be struck, but there are elements that need to be clear, explicit, and unequivocal. 1.5 requires a full phase out of coal and fossil fuel subsidies. To be able to know we are on the right track, we require full consideration, not just the mere publication of the updated synthesis report on NDCs to be considered by the SBs to take recommendations in the form of decisions that are to be taken by the COP annually until we close 2030 ambition that elements of climate action. 1.5 ambition requires the regular and systematic update of the NDCs in line with the best available science and stock-taking outcomes to inform not just communication and preparation, but rather implementation, which is what the Paris Agreement was set for all the world. Urgency demands that we launch a work program today that builds on the action and commitments that we hope to adequately capture in the overall decisions and not prevent actions from taking place subject to further deliberation. If any, further deliberations shall go to consider how we are progressing and what further actions are required on track to hold us to where we have to in 2030. As the draft cover decision indicates, reducing emissions by 45% with regards to 2010 levels, and that's on track to. On the other hand, finance is also at the heart of this success. We have engaged constructively over the last week to get as much agreement as possible throughout the agenda. We see movement and willingness to reach consensus. The long-term finance agenda and the initiation of deliberations over the new corporate finance are two of the main key political issues. We appreciate the overall sense of proposed decisions for both issues. We appreciate in particular that the new goal is framed in the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. Nevertheless, we see critical pieces still missing, including to actively decide that this work program is meant to set a new collective goal for finance. This is missing in the text. We cannot engage in a process for 2 or 3 years to simply deliver it. Procedural clarity on the process forward to be fully open, inclusive and representative of all parties and observers, including among the regions. We do not have clarity yet over how regional consultation will take place. Greater ambition on how to close the gap for adaptation finance, including with the understanding that this will not be in detriment to mitigation finance. Agreement by developed countries to continue the assessment of the 100 billion goal by 2027, so that we can cover the period of its goal 2020-2025. We feel that we are in a correct pathway to deliver on these issues. Regarding iterations on the Article 6 text, key elements are falling into place, and there seems to be good momentum to deliver the rest of the pending items under a standard of environmental integrity. Despite being appreciative to the progress made, there is still a lot of work to finish. I would like to express its utmost concern with what seems to be a systematic refusal to take 6.4 supervisory body sessions truly inclusive. We have repeatedly stressed the need for these sessions to be transmitted through electronic means and the recordings made available to ensure that those who cannot fly to home regularly have the same access to those who do. See as the work that this supervisory body will be entrusted to do over the next few years, which is critical to ensure upholding the environmental integrity of the outcome we hope to achieve here. On a related subject, we have heard the repeated call from indigenous peoples and civil society to ensure that we have independent grievance mechanism for the Article 6.4 framework, a call that we have taken up and we have submitted in textual form, both of which we expect to see in the outcome. On transparency, we are concerned that the outcome of transparency goes beyond the flexibility arrangements established under the MPGs adopted with the Commission. We call on all parties to uphold an ambitious approach to transparency, not as a burden but as a tool to better inform our collective efforts, being this a very important piece of the ambition that the Paris Agreement, the ambition mechanism of the Paris Agreement. On loss and damage, we regret that the proposal presented by the G77 and China during yesterday night's ministerial consultation to establish a loss and damage facility was not heard by the presidency and was not included in the draft COP and CMA decisions. Instead, those decisions contained a proposal that was not presented and discussed during yesterday's ministerial. This is a very unbalanced manner to proceed. We need specific finance for loss and damage, which is much more than finance for the technical assistance provided through the Santiago network. It is very disappointing to see the reference to nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches from the text. Nature-based solutions already have a broadly accepted definition together with a robust standard. Their importance lies not only in the climate change mitigation, but also in their crucial contribution to social development and increasing the resilience of the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate crisis. We urge governments to reinstate this language in the final COP decision text. It would be a missed opportunity otherwise. We understand that some parties, like us, believe that the current text could need further work. Our invitation is any adjustment is to increase the ambition in various areas and not to reduce the ambition in other areas to achieve a balance. IPEC encourages the presidency to continue being bold, to aim high for the sake of the 1.5 and a robust and meaningful outcome of all the decisions. It is important that we arrive at consensus. Mr. President, we are at the end of the line here in Glasgow, the one where the world will look for the deliverables that will secure the 1.5 and sustainable future. Let's deliver. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. The European Union seeks the floor. I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Loka. Let me start by joining others in thanking you for all your efforts so that we can conclude this COP with ambitious conclusions that can take hold and start to work what needs to be done. This morning, an hour ago, my son Mark sent me a picture of my grandson, Case, who's 1 year old. I was thinking, Case will be 31 when we're in 2050. And it's quite thought to understand that if we succeed, he'll be living in a world that's livable. He'll be living in an economy that is clean, with air that is clean, at peace with his environment. If we fail, and I mean fail now in the next couple of years, he will fight with other human beings for water and food. That's the stark reality we face. So 1.5 degrees is about avoiding a future for our children and grandchildren that is under. I might not reach 2050, probably won't, but he will be there as a young man, and I want him to live a peaceful, prosperous life, like I wanted for everybody's children and grandchildren in this room. This is personal, this is not about politics. And I don't live in Palau, I don't live on Barbados, I don't live on the Marshall Islands. But there it's even far more personal because you're standing with your feet in the water. And this is what we need to address today. We need to make sure major emitters reduce their emissions so that we keep 1.5 alive. That needs to be at the heart of our conclusions today. In Egypt next year, we've done it. We're on the track for 1.5. That's what we need to do between now and next year. Everyone needs to take their responsibility. The European Union, we're doing our part. Our targets are even written into law, so we will be sure to contribute to that. And if we need to do more, we will be doing more. The COP must also send a clear signal about our commitments to halt fossil fuel subsidies and finally turn the page on coal. We've seen last week through the leadership of South Africa that real change is possible, even under very difficult circumstances. And I applaud the leadership of President Ramaphosa. That is the way forward, and we want to be part of that form of transition. So let's leave Glasgow with a strong action on coal power, subsidies for fossil fuels. Because without these concrete steps, our targets will be utterly meaningless. We can only get started in earnest. We can only ensure that we keep the major emitters accountable if we now finalize that rule book. It's like a breath in the shoe for years now. We need to get this done. And I believe that we must adopt the reporting formats applicable to all parties and essential to tracking progress towards our targets. On Article 6, we must include rules that ensure environmental integrity of international carbon markets that increase and do not undermine the ambition of the NDCs. We believe that the compromise on the table here in Glasgow is a better option than what was on the table in Madrid. It can lead to robust and vibrant markets, can support compliance with Paris, and introduce discipline to voluntary markets. But we have to move quickly so that we close these loopholes and we go from say finally is agreed. As we hear across this room, and we've just heard some really compelling testimony, the crisis is here. The climate crisis is upon us. I just mentioned countries like Palau and Barbados and others who are suffering so terribly already now. So adaptation is really today a matter of survival. I've heard that call loud and clear this week, also this morning, from the High Ambition Coalition and the African. Loss and damage is a key part of compensation. It's time to move and find the solutions that will help vulnerable countries respond to the damage and destruction the climate crisis has already caused. We can find a way out of this, I'm sure, together in a cooperative atmosphere. So let's keep working, building on the progress already achieved, which is well reflected, and thank you for that, in the text. On finance, developed countries have not delivered enough. Much has been said about the $100 billion committed for 2020. Only reaching that objective by 2023 is frankly disappointing. In the past few months, considerable efforts have been made to close the gap. The European Union already gives $27 billion and is ready to explore the possibility of further efforts. We fully support the call of the High Ambition Coalition with respect to adaptation finance. We also understand the importance of getting more predictability, more stability to those flows. Looking ahead, we must also acknowledge that this cannot just be the same public money from the same donors. Yes, existing flows must continue and must increase, double where possible. But to make a real dent, we need to grow our donor base. We also need to be creative. Private finance has to be a part of the equation. And we have to look at the role played by global financial institutions. They were built for a world of 1945. They are no longer fitted for the world of today. So we need to make sure they are ready to address the challenges humanity faces. Now, if we are really to be on track for 1.5, we will need a lot more financial firepower. And I salute the creativity of people like Prime Minister Miyamoto, Draghi, and others who said, let's look at the role SDRs can play in all this. Let's mobilize every instrument we have at our disposal. At the same time, we have to continue to work on setting a new collective quantified goal on climate finance for the time after 2025. We stand ready to work on this in the coming hours. Time is running out, but it's not too late. So let's get practical. Thank you.
Thank you for that intervention, European Union. I now call on Costa Rica to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for all the work you're doing, for your leadership, and all the work that your team is doing to have us here. We have been investing too much time in deliberations. We're here to take decisions. We're here to continue supporting your work to have a robust outcome. The kids, the scientists, everyone is out there looking at us, and we can only have robust outcome if it is aligned to the 1.5 goal. For Costa Rica, all decisions and all the work here in Glasgow should be framed to keep this 1.5 alive. These core decisions represent a good starting point, but we think that other elements should be included. We welcome the references under the science and art section. We also recognize the work with an adaptation finance and loss of damages, because in order to keep the 1.5 goal, ambition should be addressed in a comprehensive manner. For us, it is critical to enhance the call for action in this decisive decade, and to have a clear call to present enhanced NDCs, especially for the main emitters. We understand that this is a systemic change in our economies, and for this reason, we also want clear languages on the need to eliminate all fossil fuel subsidies, not only the inefficient ones, and to accelerate the phasing out of coal power. We also welcome the inclusion text on special drawing rights as an additional source of resources for developing countries. And for us, it's very important the line and the language around doubling finance for adaptation from current levels. We also welcome strong wording on human rights and indigenous communities. And we also consider that we need to ensure robust carbon market rules apply to all mechanisms and that are developed transparently. On loss and damages, action should be strengthened and the right vehicles to do so should be put in place beyond only workshops. Finally, Mr. President, this COP has given nature a central status in climate change agenda. For this reason, the elimination of nature-based solution references is not consistent with COP's approach. And we want to see the reinsertion of this language. Science is clear. If we want to achieve the 1.5 goal, we need healthy ecosystems. We are here to support you, to continue working, to finish the rule, and to accelerate climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Speaker, for that intervention. Saudi Arabia seeks the floor right now. Give the floor to Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, you have so far navigated us this very last day in a very successful manner. We commend you for that. Look forward to finishing. We still hope to have a successful finish, and we finish with everybody on board, Your Excellency. I think the COP decision that you have put to us is something that is workable, something that can be considered. However, we are in touch with you and your team to ensure that nothing in that text, nothing in that COP decision would skew the balance that we struck in Paris Agreement. It would rewrite some of the provisions of Paris Agreement. It would emphasize certain parts of Paris Agreement at the expense of others. I think if we all conduct ourselves and hold our positions faithful to Paris Agreement, we'll get a good decision out of Glasgow here, Your Excellency. I'm not going to go into the details of the cover decision, but the one overarching discussion we are hearing is the ambition and keeping the 1.5 alive. This is no-brainer. We all know that in the room. Nobody disagrees in the room. The question is how we're going to do that. On what grounds we're going to do that. What is the system that is going to govern our pursuit to keep it alive and keep it within range? Where is equity? Where is PBDR? Where is finance? Where is technology? Where is capacity building? All of that is not really at equal footing when we talk about the ambition, Your Excellency. So unless we see really fixing, and we see that we really bring a balanced decision that keep us all faithful to the agreement that we have agreed to in Paris in 2015, and we're just about to start implementation, and we see directions pushed from here and there to skew that balance and take it out of its own context. Your Excellency, I don't want to go in details of finance, adaptation, and see what kind of decisions we are having. When we talk about mitigation, we're talking about operative decision. When we talk about adaptation, it's all just motherhood statements that we are all just likewise the situation for finance. We still have a chance to have a successful COP, Your Excellency. We are in your hand. Once again, we commend you for your leadership, Archie and the rest of the team. We're working very closely with you, and we look forward to having a nice applause at the closure of this meeting, hopefully this evening at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary, for your intervention. Marshall Islands seeks the floor. I give the floor to Marshall Islands.
Mr. President, Excellencies, thank you for your work on this draft. We are in the final stretch, and this is text that takes us in the right direction. We think you have navigated our ship well. Presidency, Excellencies, 1.5 is non-negotiable. Our safety, the safety of my children and yours, hangs in the balance. As I said to the High Ambition Coalition this morning, it's time for us to level up. This will be the decade that determines the rest of human history. We cannot let it slip by. We need to keep returning to the table. We must see 1.5 aligned NDCs and long-term strategies delivered by the major emitters next year. Mr. President, this text will only work if we have fossil fuel subsidies and coal included. We should strengthen this language by referring to unabated coal and to all fossil fuel subsidies, not only inefficient ones. Fossil fuel subsidies are paying for our own destruction. We welcome the commitment in this text to a doubling of adaptation finance. We have been saying that adaptation is not optional, and we are glad that this demand is reflected. A consensus is emerging across developed and developing nations that a collective doubling of adaptation finance is required. This marks real progress. We will not settle for anything less. An area that has slipped back is loss and damage. This issue is too important to settle with a workshop, with no tie-in to the process or outcomes that we can rely on. We must not allow a step back on such a critical issue. Finally, on Article 6, we need a resolution that results in real reductions. The zero-sum offsetting era must end. We are happy to see the inclusion of language on human rights in the most recent Article 6 text, recognizing that this language could be stronger. On the rule book, we cannot leave here with an agreement that undermines the spirit of the enhanced transparency framework that we agreed in Paris. Unrestrained flexibility will not help us to get onto a 1.5C trajectory. It will undermine our progress. The Republic of the Marshall Islands strongly supports the references in the text to human rights and to youth. These are essential if this process is to respond with any credibility to the present moment. Mr. President, Excellencies, this text is the ground from which we can build upwards. To fall back would be to betray our commitment to future generations. Thank you.
I thank the Marshall Islands for their intervention. Friends, I have a message from the Secretariat, which I'd just like to read out. We're currently facing an issue with reaching the maximum capacity of this room. Could all delegates, including observers, please only sit at their respective flags behind it, and if not, then please vacate seats. We hope that all parties are in the room, and we remind delegates that the plenary is screened and that meeting room 9 can be used as the. Thank you for your consideration. I now see that Kenya seeks applause. I give the floor to Kenya.
Thank you very much, President. And let me join those who already congratulated you for the manner in which you have conducted this COP, and also the previous activities, building consensus among ministers. Your leadership is outstanding, and we mention for it. Secondly, President, today morning when I was coming here, I saw a sign which I found quite profound. And it read, if you want to know about climate change, ask your child. And I wondered exactly what that. President, that reminded me of the meeting we had with the youth in Milan, group of youth from across the globe, 400 of them, who sat, discuss these matters that we have been discussing for the last 5 years, 6 years. And within 3 days, they have resolved all outstanding issues, including the ones that have detained us here for the last 2 weeks. And that I understood it. And also, I also understood the meaning of the saying that we, the current generations, the older generation, have not inherited the earth from our forefathers. We have borrowed it. It's on loan to us as trustees for our children, children. But because of our greed, we have messed up the future of our kids and posterity. And I think we must be ashamed. And you remember, President, that the youth gave us the last chance. The words very, very clearly were, this is the last chance we give you to Glasgow,
sort out your Chairman, President, I hope and pray that that today, not tomorrow. I do not want myself, in fact, to exceed, to extend tomorrow would be a failure in itself. So let's be prepared ourselves to work around the remaining part of this day and ensure that we conclude these proceedings. Thirdly, President, Africa, Kenya, 1.5 for Africa and Kenya. I speak on behalf of my colleagues, speak on behalf of African group. For Kenya and Africa, 1.5 is actually 3 plus. This is what we live in. This is what our communities live through. And that is why in Kenya, in Africa, we cry, we bleed. We bleed when it rains, we cry when it doesn't rain. So for us, ambition 1.5 is it's not a statistic. It is a matter of life and death. So we are quite aligned. And the African countries, Kenya included, have done their bit within the limited resources that is within their means. As we speak now, President, 2 million Kenyans are facing starvation, devastated by drought. Lost their livestock, their crops, even wildlife, because of drought induced by climate change. So for us, we are applying 1.5. Now, President, ambition is not just mitigation. For us, as Kenya and as Africa, ambition is a 3-legged stool, if I may. And that has to be seen as a package. Actually, it is mitigation, emission reduction, it is adaptation, it is loss and damage, but it must be crowned on with means of implementation. So, President, we have given due consideration to your latest iteration of this issue, and it is a good improvement of what we had seen yesterday. I am sure that whatever remains outstanding can be polished up in the next couple of hours. I think it is a good draft that we must adopt by the end of Mr. President, the issue of resources and means of implementation is absolutely critical for us. A number of our NDCs and Africa and Kenya, countries in Africa, the first countries to submit their NDCs. It is important that means of implementation in terms of, I've seen your draft, Mr. President, the draft that you submitted, that is iteration. And I'm quite happy about it. That we talk about adaptation finance, absolutely critical. And it's a little bit disappointing that we have been talking about there over the share of proceeds in Article 6.2. I think it should be settled that the proceeds in Article 6.2 go to adaptation. And Article 6, the ambition in Article 6 is not ambition just for mitigation. It is also for adaptation. So we are a little bit disappointed. Actually, I'm not disappointed that we are still arguing about the share of proceeds. Similarly, we are a little disturbed when we're happy about the Santiago network and the launch of the proposal for establishment of the Santiago network and so on and so forth. But we are a little bit disappointed again that after hours and hours of negotiation, including last night until last midnight, the establishment of the Glasgow finance mechanism facility to finance what we see now, and it's reflected in your latest decision, is support for technical purposes What we have in mind here is not giving money to consultants to fly around the globe to come and educate us, teach us about those and damages, and prescribe to us and theoretical decisions. What we're talking about is a dedicated facility. And I hope that today our colleagues see the same. They are also quite disturbed and disappointed, Mr. President, that the special needs for Africa and circumstances has been dismissed, even without giving us a chance to make our case. We are not saying that Africa is special or be treated as especially, or are we saying that any other region is not? We say give us a chance to demonstrate what we can be doing. In terms of my distributive panel, as I'm sure I also will make a more discussion, finance must be not just adequate and predictable. Finance must be new and additional, and I don't see the principle of new. Nor do I see the principle of additionality captured in this state in the current position. No, finance must also be accessible, because that is why it takes roughly 2-3 years. And I'm sure that any proposal approved by the GF and GCF. So accessibility is absolutely important, but more fundamentally conditionality. We hear a lot about, oh yes, we have given this an amount as a country, and we appreciate all these, but then on what so the issue about these concession, grants, concession amounts, all these are overburdening our people. So, President, I think there is room here to conclude this. And we, as the Kenya, are prepared to coordinate, as I'm sure my colleague will say about Africa, but we also need trust. And I am quite happy that you see that in your decision, this should be the last point now. In your last point, there is actually an issue of regret that the pledge of $100 billion US dollars that was made more than 10 years ago, and it's been one excuse after another, and now instead of 2020, now we are being told we have been presented a delivery plan, 100 billion in 2023, and 500 billion by 2025. If that is supposed then to be encouragement, it is encouraging, but trust has been lost. We need much more to restore trust. And I, speaking for myself, our trust has been shattered. And I am quite happy to promote that we are the words of the representative of the EU saying this. The major emitters bear the greatest responsibility. It is not that 20 countries that control 80% of the global GDP contribute 80% of the global greenhouse emissions. They have the means, they have the wherewithal. They are the ones that are pushing us, rightly, about more emission in terms of mitigation, because that's how they interpret emission. They must take their responsibility. And I think one of the recommendations that need to come and decisions here is those who, the major emitters, must resubmit their NDCs by the COP27, aligning them, provide align them with I thank you, President, for now, but I'm sure, because I'm sure today I will say much more. Thank you very much.
Kenya for that intervention. United States will run over for the United States.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your leadership, as others have said, you were very much pull us together, and may I say to all my colleagues here, we want to express our gratitude to everybody in the business spirit, determination here to get this done and to get it done well. I listened carefully to our good friend, Kenya, and he made a lot of sense, and the United States has never shied away. In fact, I think we say consistently that 20 countries equal 80% of all emissions. They do bear the greatest responsibility, and President Biden, over his current office, has been determined to live up to that responsibility. Beginning with just one first day within an hour of his joining the Paris Agreement. Let me just say that we believe that this is existential, and many of you here, one speech or another for years, has said it's existential. And for many of you, it's not existential in the future, it's existential today. People are dying today. All around the world, the impacts are being felt today. And so we have to live up to the expectation of young people who don't want this place just to be a place of words. It has to be, in the next hours, a place of action. And if it is indeed existential, then we can't just say this with pain. So let me just say a few things about the conversation about where we are. On adaptation, we strongly support the language on adaptation, including 2-year work plan, local adaptation. On mitigation, we are here, as I think all of you are, not because this is a pet project of honor. We're here because this is what science is telling us we have to do. This is fact-based. Not ideological, not political, it's fact-based. And the facts are coming at us faster, faster, bigger and bigger every day. So we're here to follow the science, and the scientists, the best scientists, the IPCC and others, tell us we have to reduce emissions by 45% in the next 10 years in order to keep 1.5 degrees alive. If we don't do that, not only miss 1.5 degrees, we can't do net zero in 2050 unless there's some miraculous invention that sucks it all out of the atmosphere or advances us beyond where we are today. We can't bank on that. We have to make decisions today according to the precautionary principle of government. And that tells us that to avoid the worst consequences of the crisis, we have to act now. So on mitigation, we believe very, based on Paris, based on all the prior COPs, that it's imperative that on mitigation, text be preserved. It cannot get weaker, it can't go backwards from here. It includes critical references, 1.5, because of the science, revisiting NDCs, because the evidence comes at us faster and faster. Science grows every single year. Of course, we need to think about what we can do better and when. And the decisive decade and phasing out unabated coal and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies must stay. That language must stay. Unabated coal. We're not talking about all. We're not talking about limited. We're not talking about the capacity. Unabated coal. How could we possibly in 2021, knowing what the evidence is, be wishy-washy on that subject? Those subsidies have to go. And We're the largest oil and gas producer in the world. We have some of those subsidies. President Biden has put in legislation to get rid of them. We are struggling each year to find money, but $2.5 trillion in the last 5 years, 6 years went into subsidies for fossil fuel. That's a definition of insanity. We're allowing to feed the very problem we're here to try to cure. Doesn't make sense. So we cannot go back from where we are. We're strongly supportive of adaptation finance. In the spirit of compromise, we can and will go along with the approach of doubling. But we have a couple of important edits that we think make the text, in fact, stronger, more acceptable, and more effective. It doesn't make sense to limit where you can bring money from. You bring money, that's what we want more money. And it doesn't make sense for the COP to restrict any one nation. And I know our friend Travis Timmerman just talked about this. Don't limit the pool for where we can draw the money. That doesn't make sense. We have important steps we think we can take on loss and damage. We can support the creation of a new technical assistance facility to provide the financial assistance to operationalize the Santiago network and other key elements in the government decision for the CMA. But the placement of language needs to be consistent with the agreements that we reached in Paris when we went through this fight in Paris. And we also very strongly support the inclusion of ocean language. Turning to the global issues of transparency, we've made very significant progress, but more work needs to be done. It can be, I think, fairly quickly on the technical details in a way that does not walk back through the agreements that we reached in Paris. That doesn't make sense. So let's hold those. On Article 6, we've also seen good progress. And a lot of parties, I think, are now converging on ideas. For the U.S., we think it's critical that any package is one that has environmental integrity and a clear accounting and strong baselines, which are essential. And we think that this is captured in the current option A language. On the baselines, we believe it's critical that it has the environmental integrity and it is protective of human rights and indigenous peoples. And that is how we think we live up to our obligation to do what we need to do to make the world healthier, safer, cleaner, and to live up to our responsibility.
I thank the United States for their intervention. I now give the floor to Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the alliances for the states. Overwhelmed that we're still left ahead. On mitigation, as we approach these final hours of the conference, a well-balanced shows the level of ambition to deliver on the goals of Paris Agreement is still not within reach. The call for phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies is weak and does not meet the urgency. Inefficient has proven ineffective for the G20, where fossil fuel subsidies are still steady despite the proclamation years ago. AOSIS is not calling for an end to fossil fuels. We are simply calling to end subsidies in major economies for the source of 3/4 of emissions over the past decade. We know where the political weight stands. Last week, we heard world leaders support less than delivering mitigation by the next one. Therefore, the Glasgow decision must reflect this political mandate. Our request for a presentation of the NDC synthesis report this evening, it was not repeated. We questioned the sort of process and the work is moving forward fast. Ministerial consultations have been very useful in the commence approach to make headway on issues that face and AOS is expected to especially on finance, to be reflective of the text. The work program on the global role adaptation is a welcome development. We encourage the use of technical expertise in the workshops. The doubling of adaptation finance by 2025 is too late. The stage should be 2023 in line with the roadmap. On finance, AOS has made a clear delivery on a finance package for small island states across each text and with the text taken together. On access to finance, we tabled an invitation for private finance providers to work together to harmonize their application procedures. This is a strategic approach to rationalize the level of effort to access private finance. Climate vulnerabilities must be reflected in access to finance. This week, we welcome the text looking at innovative approaches around special climate finance. Loss and damage is key. G77 in China has tabled the draft decision language for a process to operationalize financing for loss and damage during the facility. While loss and damage conversations tend to turn into a who's who of humanitarian aid, the China science basis of loss and damage is different from other crises. This is about climate justice. We are alarmed at the significant opposition to loss and damage financing. It has always been an integral and distinct component of the convention. Similar to mitigation and adaptation, loss and damage must be separated out in the transparency framework and effective quantifiable finance goal. We call on partners to work with the G77 to land a landmark proposal at this meeting. The oceans are 70% of our planet and we welcome the inclusion of the ocean language paragraphs. On the Paris Work Program, in Katowice, we have detailed guidelines on economic transparency framework. Some among us are wasting precious time attempting to renegotiate what was already agreed. Let us call out stalled tactics. On Article 6, it is absolutely fundamental that this goes beyond zero-sum offsetting to deliver clear communication with every transaction. The system must consistently withdraw a percentage of emission reductions so they cannot be used to offset any country's NDC, but instead contribute net emission reductions. Together with robust protections for human rights and the rights of indigenous peoples, this cancellation accounts for the atmosphere is a key benchmark for the integrity of the Article 6 system. Currently, the Article 6 text contains elements that have potential to severely undermine ambition and create a parallel market that would not be subject to the corresponding adjustments and allow significant carryover of projects and use from the key development. To add insult to injury, the methodology and scale for delivery of OMG is inadequate text. AOS has been consistent in calling for a mandatory cancellation of Article 6 for emissions reductions at issuance to ensure that the Article 6 system goes beyond zero-sum offsetting. A mandatory push cancellation needs to be our focus. Option B requires redrafting to reflect that OMG is clearly delivered to a mandatory cancellation rate that can be operationalized as soon as we adopt Article 6 guidance. We continuously repeat that the application of a low percentage does not work for us. A voluntary option for cancellation is unacceptable, not only to us but also to other groupings. We reject this voluntary option. In the cover decision, we need to see the percentage level of cancellation in the scope to ensure a present rate for mandatory cancellation to deliver OMG. The link between 6.2 and 6.4 is important. In the 6.2 text, paragraphs 36 and 37 require significant work and we will be covering text. Finally, interventions by civil society yesterday were a breath of fresh air. Don't carry over jump credits that will raise our collective ambition. It is a reminder of how our outcome here will be perceived by the world. We heard the clear call that we must step out of our game. States cannot always be the ones who are asked to compromise in the interest of consensus. It's not just words we're considering, it is our lives, livelihoods, and our future. We will not leave us. as we open the seat for questions. Thank you.
So thank you for that intervention. I now call on Guinea. Guinea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, facilitators, yes, yesterday until after midnight, we all waited, all of us take our effort to make sure that at the end of the day-to-day life, His Excellency Arab Sharma was predicted, we came over on the key concern related to our people and our respective countries. There has to be a balance in terms of ambition down to reflect over decision, adaptation, including on the finance, technology, and so on. Taking the floor on behalf of G77, on loss and damage, I have to reiterate the G77 and China are deeply disappointed that our proposal for the establishment of the Glasgow loss and damage facility has not been reflected in the revised global decision text. That proposal has been brought forward by the entire board, representing 6 of every 7 people. Enough regular climate regime to effectively respond to our needs to address the loss and damage being inflicted on our people, our communities, our economies by the impact of climate change. We want to see our proposal as the basis of us move forward on this discussion. We do recognize and appreciate the significant progress that we have already achieved in our organization of the September. Make sure that we can say we need action, and that action has to be taken now. I remember when we get out to Paris, we called the COP in Marrakesh, the COP of the action. We are talking about action. Please act now, right here in Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea, for your intervention. I now call on to take the floor. Good you have.
Thank you, Mr. President. My brother from Kenya has already spoken. Actions are concise. Thank you for convening this important meeting and for your constant efforts to lead us to success in this field. Good one is taking the floor on behalf of Africa. We associate ourselves with the comments made by Guinea on behalf of G77 and China. We are committed to contribute constructively to our common success here in Glasgow. We are especially committed to bringing the climate solutions
so desperately needed by our people, our communities, our youth, and our women, back to the African continent. It goes without saying that a strong message coming out of Glasgow is critical, and something that we will work with Egypt to build upon in the 2022 African. We agree that this draft to cover decision is a strong foundation. We need to ensure that the following concerns of Africa are clearly reflected. We will submit some elements directly to you. Finance, the political message should be aligned with science, focused on implementation on the ground. We need to stress the need to increase resources in order to respond to the needs of developing countries. Africa needs to see increased ambition on additional, reliable, accessible adaptation finance, clearly reflected in the adaptation finance sections of the draft COP decisions, with clear reference to at least doubling adaptation finance. Ambitious mitigation actions, particularly by the G20 nations, targeting the 1.5-degree target, also crucial. On loss and damage, we agree with the Marshall Islands. We seem to be losing progress we have made on loss and damage here in Glasgow. We need to recover the momentum and ambition on this issue before we leave. Finally, regarding nature-based solutions, including the oceans, we fully recognize the contribution that nature can provide to tackle climate change. We feel we need to clarify the way these solutions are implemented in the context of both FCCC and COP. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. I now give the floor to Tom. Tom, you have.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Tom is taking the floor on behalf of the LDC group, and we also support the statement made by the on behalf of China. I'd like to echo the feelings of the House in terms of the leadership presidency, especially presidency of China, as provided with trying to bring us all together. Despite that, the 46 most vulnerable LDCs that came to Glasgow with high hopes and expectations, however, in this final hour of COP26, we are full of doubts and we still keep hearing some pushback on ambition that is required to close the 2030 Climate target. Reservations and support for loss and damage. Options that undermine environmental integrity of our text, and we are still waiting to see much needed progress on climate finance. We must all acknowledge that our actions are leading us in the opposite direction. IPCC calls for 45% of reduction within this decade. NBC Synthesis report says we're heading towards more than 30.7% at the end of this decade. If emissions are not rapidly reduced within this decade, we all understand that this will expose the most vulnerable among us, and particularly the LDCs, to unacceptable levels of risk and impact. Now, broadly, we are fine with the cover decision at a minimum. The ambition for 1.5 Celsius required is maintained in the text. However, as a country deeply experiencing devastating impacts and 1.1 Celsius warming and struggling to recover, we cannot be expected to build residents impacts. And we feel that 1.5 degree without additional resources. Adaptation finance is very particular. We want to see stronger language on adaptation finance reflected in governing decision and also other finance items, including the long-term finance decision. We have been calling for at least doubling adaptation finance that long-term finance will be extended at least till 2027 under the convention. A common definition of climate finance is needed to have clarity and avoid double counting on accounting financial flows from developed countries. Decision that requires the Standing Committee on Finance to continue and finalize its deliberation on definition of climate finance is required. With regard to loss and damage, we acknowledge the progress made in laying out the process to operationalize the sentiment of loss and damage. However, finance for loss and damage remain most crucial. Last month must make decisive decision to finance loss and damage in the most countries. On adaptation, we acknowledge the progress of adaptation. Finally, on Article 6, we see progress, but there is still work to be done. We don't see balance in the current Article 6 test. We want proper treatment of overall mitigation initiative and share see. Inside and outside, there is progress. But the text is messy and needs to address complexities. We need to ensure and see environmental integrity in the market. The government achievement made so far and acknowledge that debates. As we have said earlier, we must set a precedent this time to finish our work on time. Very simple time.
frustrated. In that context of the just this section should be this section should be historical developed countries to strongly countries or much more in order to achieve the 1.5 degree and also to create a more clear Paris Agreement, 2, 3, 4, the Article 9, 10, 11, that's clearly for also, it is important for the president not to create parallel processes. We have an important process to assess not only mitigation, but all elements of the life. Is addressed in the sense of a assessment, ambition, mitigation, adaptation, this effort that is already being initiated in the next year or so. Need to strengthen process to instead of creating additional processes that are going to distract the parties that are going to that we need to keep for regarding the issue of finance in the state is still negotiation is issue in finance inside, finance outside, finance for these issues of adaptation, issues of erosion and damage, let's say, regarding Article 6, there is the need for the proceedings so we request for president to the first meeting, creating conditions for having Article 6 and considering also the possibility of all countries. Appreciate very much the direction in the we see that the institution after we also regret very much that we position which is considered regarding the integration issues addressing the relationship and we want to provide them with political confidence for you to take into consideration this team. So, Mr. President, we are eager to achieve consensus and to achieve successful 26.
I now call on Venezuela to take the floor. Venezuela,
For us, it's not only what is needed, it's not only finance, attention, capacity building, support, solidarity, international cooperation. For us, it's also about what we should do regarding climate change. We have heard many information regarding subsidies and some kind of subsidies, some kind of subsidies. I think this is interesting way. This is what we call in the IPCC. It's a policy perspective orientation that we are giving here in the conversation. And we think that this issue, subsidies, are at the same level of unilateral measures. They both are policy restricted and they both are necessary for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. For this, Mr. Chair, we want to reflect the importance of having a reflection in the preambular part of the cover decision to the Article 3.5 of the Convention. This is like a rewriting recognition for the Paris Agreement because the unilateral and unprecedented measures directly affect the capacity of countries in the fight against climate change. They put countries in a situation of vulnerability to fight climate change. We think that it's important that in this very last round of discussion, reflection, that we appreciate this to try to convey this message of working in the future, maybe doing research in a space to have a state discussion of the education of unilateral measures. Venezuela has made a lot of activity regarding this issue. It has had a very interesting piece of international experience and academic experience. And we think that we in the following step of this COP, church should be in the same space of intervention. This is the issue of unilateral measures and the relation with the climate change. Thank you very much.
thank you, Venezuela, for your intervention. Yeah, since
translate to balanced outcomes that ensures a strong foundation for addressing climate change. At the outset, let me say that we must deliver a strong message of our collective resolve for accelerated mitigation and adaptation actions to combat climate change in this decade. Now, this resolve, far greater credibility, is also accompanied with an equally strong resolve for mobilization and delivery of an enhanced climate finance to developing countries by the urgency of scaling up finance without must be emphasized. In this context, Mr. President, I'd like to convey our deep disappointment at the lack of significant progress in the climate finance related agenda items. We'd like to lend our voice in support to the sentiments expressed by companies in least developed countries in the need for an adequate oversight of finance to deliver an operational multilateral Mr. President, the overwhelming role of historical interventions in keeping the rise in temperature must be urgency and ambition must begin with the actions and commitments of developed countries. They must actually take the lead in phasing out fossil fuels. In reaching net zero, developed countries must take within their fair share of enabling access to carbon space for developing countries. Developed countries must enhance their current tendencies and reach net zero much before 2050. The really small and integral and meeting any carbon budget is first and foremost the right and entitlement of developing countries. Hence, rapid mitigation by developed countries in this critical decade is important to keep 1.5 degrees. On adaptation, the pursuit of on adaptation must be driven by the parties and their submissions based on their experiences, needs, and priorities. All varieties of experts in shades of opinion may be invited to provide inputs, and we must not leave Glasgow without a strong effort and just decision on adaptation. Mr. President, we are aware that time is running out, and we work with you to arrive at consensus on the items of law before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia, for that intervention. Switzerland seeks the floor and now with the floor sits.
Mr. President, let me just very briefly express my full support to the statements made by my colleagues from Canada, Norway, EU, Costa Rica, Marshall Islands, the US, and others. If to have a decision, the decision signal that we want to keep 1.5 degrees in reach, we have not to preserve what it says in mitigation. We have to make it clearly strong. This is a decision not only to express general ambition, but also concrete specific elements how to put this ambition into operation. Just 3 examples. We hope that we will not reach 1.5 degrees. Main emitters are not moving to 1.5. And we all know that 1.5 can only be reached if all harmful fossil fuel substances that in general are phased out and not only inefficient substances are limited. And we also know that if countries do not develop long-term low greenhouse gas emission strategies in line with 1.5 objective, we will not get there. We believe this should be reflected in our decision. And let me also repeat, we should not weaken Paris, neither can. Transparency must be robust and is said by others in line with Paris. Markets must live up to the highest standards of integrity, and effective support for adaptation, access to such support must increase. We need an outcome in each decision that brings us towards 1.5 and prevents catastrophic tipping points and avoids any elements which would make it more difficult, such as large carryover or double counting. So let me conclude that Switzerland is committed to work with transparent, inclusive manner towards a robust and ambitious outcome.
Thank you, Susan, for your intervention. Friends, colleagues, time is obviously now running, and we all have a lot of work left to do. We've got 60 more parties that want to speak, and therefore I will take all of them, but I'm now going to close the floor. And one more added certainty, but I will then close the floor. I hope you will forgive me if you were planning to come in and there will be further opportunities at the plenary. I hope no trouble today. So I now call on the Dominican Republic to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, we want to thank you for your leadership and your efforts to have all of us here very early in our last day of this so much needed conference of the parties. Unlike other parties, we congratulate your protocols and effort, which we've been emphasizing to all UK officials. Without the support of your team back in Santo Domingo, our country would be able to be represented here today. I started my job at 22 years old as a DR government official, and I have grown up professionally shaped by the UNFCCC negotiations. Sometimes it still feels like a dream to be seated in the negotiation tables with the biggest world leaders, yet sometimes they have let us down. The Dominican Republic is a small island developing state. We are on the root of all storms that impacted Caribbean, Central America, and North America. As you know, we highly depend on tourism, and the pandemic impacted our performance deeply. We share our island, and we are doing big efforts to ensure protected areas, main source of water resources, and agroforestry can coexist with robust national and international commitment to protect our country's forests, which include mangrove reforestation to try to build resilience. Even being a poor country, back in 2010, we started to prepare for the preparation of an approach of sustainable management of forests. After many years of work, including national communications, a first BUR, a reference level, a technical annex to the BUR, and an enhanced NDC comprising 27% of emission reductions and 7% subject to national investment, our efforts are indented, as press finance has been left out of the COP decision and Article 6. They are clearly expressed, as well as ENG on behalf of the Coalition for Rainforest Nations, that the results of Decision 14/19 need to be recognized. Those have passed a robust process of transparency, accuracy, completeness, comparability, and consistency that I already mentioned many times. Again, we reiterate that Article 5 is part of the Paris Agreement, and for us, it is important to maintain the balance in this text. If in Article 6.4, there is an option to consider service transfer for 2013 or 2016, we also need to consider the result of Decision 14/19 from 2016. Note that RED Plus is an achievement of this convention and is included in our NDC, also in our law of national development, and most importantly, we have climate change adaptation in our constitution. This mechanism that impacts both adaptation and mitigation needs to be considered as such. We trust your guidance, Mr. President, and for the fund that I personally have for the United Kingdom for being trained in this country. I really expect a successful COP. Thank you.
Thank the Dominican Republic for their intervention. Japan seeks the floor, and I give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, colleagues, Japan thanks the President and the Minister for engaging with us and listening to our activities. Japan joins others in supporting the President's efforts for agreement. The completion of the Paris Agreement should form an essential part of success in lasting. Japan is very encouraged that parties have been working in a constructive spirit. Let us all support the authorization proposal Article 64 for strong accountability. Japan is willing to support emerging consensus on adaptation and loss and energy. On the cover decisions, thanks to the efforts of the presidency, we now have a text that can send a strong call for action to all. With a limited number of important amendments, Japan will support the text. Japan has 17 comments. Opposition paragraph 20 and the corresponding paragraph 16. Opposition paragraph 38, 39 and the corresponding paragraph 16. Some paragraphs limit call for action to developed countries. All parties should be involved. Japan has expressed support to Dublin adaptation plans. For consistency, the language of paragraph 9 of the long-term plans decision shows the views in the conversation. Prime Minister Kishida announced to Dublin adaptation plans for $14.8 billion in 5 years. Japan will live along its commitments. Japan will cooperate with the presidency and all parties for success in blessing. In pursuit of efforts to increase to 1.5, as Prime Minister Kishida said at the summit, all parties should act together in this critical decade of high ambitions.
Thank you, Japan, for your intervention. I see that the BC is forming.
Mr. President, when you prepare to assume the presidency of COP26, you need 1.5 per North Star. And I'm happy to hear that everyone who has spoken has also called for us to get on that 1.5 pathway. You also recognize the importance of nature-based solutions, the important role played by both marine and land-based ecosystems, and of course, the custodians of those ecosystems, the indigenous peoples and local communities. However, we seem to have lost that in your consideration of the text. In your CV, common decision, paragraph 36, it seems it has also got weaker. We need to phase out all use of fossil fuels immediately, including coal, and we must end the subsidies for fossil fuels. We must eventually so that we achieve a parity with that provided. And we must have language that provides support to those vulnerable communities already experiencing the loss and damage. And that is adaptation. I'm speaking about support to those communities already experiencing loss and damage.
Thank you for your intervention. And I give the floor to Bangladesh.
Thank you. To be illustrated, we must follow the mandate of the Convention and Paris Agreement and the common differentiated responsibilities as enshrined in this important document.
关于1号决定案，中央认为目前出现的这个案子和差异有了一定的进步，所以大家进一步。
First, that public institution became the draft that came out this morning had some improvements compared to the previous one and provided good places for further discussions.
中央认为，这个目前的案子还应该进一步的强化和充实关于适应资金、技术、能力建设部分的内容。
But with developing the current text should further strengthen the promise of adaptation, finance, technical capacities for youth.
以便在结合适应和资金的实质手段方面，
and to strike a balance on the implementation tools for mitigation, adaptation, and finance.
目前对于适应和资金和实质手段仍然缺乏条件性的安排和实质性的内容，特别是对于全球性目标和1000亿美元结构资金等方面的内容，还应该进一步的强化。
Now we still see a lack of specific and detailed arrangements and substantial content on the implementation means for adaptation and finance, particularly on global adaptation rules and how to deliver on 100 billion results by finance. They should be further strengthened this part.
第二个案文应该坚持目标和相关授权，坚持20年区域第1.5个目标。
Secondly, we think the text should adhere to both principles and mandates of the Paris Agreement and stay committed to the global temperature goal as stated in the Paris Agreement that is to promote global temperature rise well below 2 degrees and persuade efforts limited to 1.5.
强调保持1.5度可及，需要各国。 来坚持共同的有序的分离的方式。
To keep 1.5 degrees in reach, it requires all parties to conduct actions to enhance cooperation under the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities.
我们还要加强合作，并确保资金技术的多样方面的模式。
Not only should they take strong actions, but also enhance cooperation and make sure that important conditions for implementation, such as finance and technology, are in place.
第三是按照应该坚持各方共识的最大约束，以求务实和适度。
Thirdly, we think the text should stress the biggest commonality, purpose, and strive for it to be appropriate and practical.
目前案文对气候危机的情况给予了很好的重点，对进一步开展行动很好，也在确保了安排有必要的。
The current text has already given high importance to the urgency of climate crisis and also has practical arrangements for how to take further action to close the gap to emission reduction goals.
但是有的安排应该在大体系统方面的规定下，与各方落实国家规定的时间，通过全球盘点机制，对全球政府进入盘点。 帮助决定国家政策行动的意见，由各方自主决定。
But at the end of these arrangements should be based on the framework and provisions of Paris Agreement to allow parties space and time to implement the SEES, and also to leverage the global consulting mechanism to review the global progress and let the parties decide on their own the roadmap and timetable for their national policies and actions.
关于这种条文的实施细则，中方认为需要制定有力的批准体系，也要坚持遵守巴黎协定的要求，特别是在相应的调整问题上，中方愿意要将在此进一步探讨具有包容性的解决方案。
About the rules book for the Paris Agreement, Article 6, China believes on the one hand, we need ambitious and effective implementation rules for Article 6, but it also should appear to be in line with the provisions and spirit of Paris Agreement, especially on matters of corresponding adjustment. And China is ready to discuss more with the parties to put together a more inclusive solution.
关于强化的互助方向，中方认为应该充分体现发展中国家的灵活性和对发展中国家的有益支持。
As for the enhanced transparency framework, China believes it should allow more flexibility for developing countries and also provide specify more capacity support for the developing countries to implement this transparency framework.
关于不同时间方向，希望各方可以找到包容性的方案。
About the common time frame, I hope we work together to find a more inclusive solution.
关于税负的资金，中方建议本次会议可以就全球税务目标和长期资金问题取得积极的、有实质性的指引，切实有效的回应发展中国家长期以来的关切。
Finally, about adaptation and finance, China suggests COP26 could make positive and substantive progress on matters such as the global adaptation goals and long-term finance, so as to address the concerns of developing countries for a long time.
中方愿意支持主席尽快的拿出一个基于科学、基于规则、结合税务资金的重要性平衡适度的决定。
China is ready to support the presidency in agreeing on an outcome that is science-based and also rules-based, that have the balance of elements, mitigation, adaptation, and finance, and have appropriate wording. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, for your intervention. And now I will give the floor to Philippines. Philippines, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. President, Philippines would like to support the statement that we have of Secretary China. Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues, thank you for giving the Philippines opportunity to articulate its concerns about the unfortunate turn of events for concepts very important to us. And the developing world seems to be insidiously disappearing. Specifically, I would like to indicate our concern on the handling of critical negotiation issues in Article 6, especially our recommendation on the inclusion of a very important mitigation concept that will serve as towards accelerating global warming situation. It was there that the start of this COP, but surprisingly disappeared in the course of the sessional text calculation. Mr. President, there are first specifically the concepts of greenhouse gas emission avoidance. We from developing countries learn from you, our development partners, about risk management, which is the only real solution to this rapidly declining problem that we are facing. We are always highlighting that ACC reports that humanity still has time to avert gas warming over the age. This is only possible if we transform the way we live and avoid making the climate change problem more intense than it is now. What is the essence of our proposition, Mr. President? It is quite simple. Developing country parties should be allowed to avoid potential emissions by helping us to shift our technological basis into climate-benign ones, or we contribute some more to the global warming problem. We would like to remind our partners, Mr. President, that developing countries have been guaranteed their right to continue and sustainable economic development under the Convention and now the Paris Agreement. But the problem is we do not have the means, especially finance, to buy these technologies and transform our world. These technologies will not reside at the developing world. Since we cannot stop developing, that will be catastrophic impacts on our people, especially the poorest and most vulnerable. We need to use the means of implementation hard now, while the problem can still be mitigated. Avoidance is a legitimate technical action, the risk management of people, which will be cost effective for all of us in the long run in this agreement. In this agreement, Mr. President, we are actually applying the same risk management framework to both process, meaning pollution from greenhouse gas and managing its impacts, which requires adaptation and addressing intensifying loss damage. So both pollution source and impact management involved are very important and highest choice mitigation action, which is avoidance or prevention, because we still can. We will also point out the fact that greenhouse gas and impact mitigation are not ultimate goals. Sustainable development is. My question is, can here value greenhouse gas reductions ensure overall mitigation and sustainable development? The Philippines therefore poses this challenge to the parties represented here today. We want this problem to accelerate global warming to end as soon as possible. Well, developing countries do. That is why they want to live from a cleaner future and not repeat the colossal mistake of the industrial revolution that placed us in this mess. In this context, Mr. President, therefore, we demand that the concept of emission avoidance be reinstated in all Article 6 mechanisms, tools, and modalities, and to rephrase the non-committal treatment of ex-preferred avoidance. This would be integrated in the main decision of current parts. For example, in Section 3F of the 6.2 decision. Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Philippines, for your intervention. I now give the floor to South Africa. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. South Africa takes to the floor to express our appreciation in yourself as COP President and all parties for the progress made thus far towards a more balanced outcome of COP26. We remain hopeful that the positive and progressive signals from the summit and the side processes will find expression in the formal multilateral process. South Africa fully supports the remarks by Guinea on behalf of the G77 and China, Gabon, and as chair of the Africa Group, and India as chair of the Basics Group. South Africa has always emphasized that we should leave Glasgow with an outcome that reflects ambition on all three aspects of the Paris Agreement, namely mitigation, adaptation, and the means of implementation. In this regard, we welcome the decision to embark on a formal work program on the global goal on adaptation. Mr. President, in a context where developing countries are showing leadership in addressing climate change far beyond their means or historical responsibilities, even in the midst of the devastating socio-economic impacts of COVID-19, it is particularly important that enabling means of implementation are available. We need support not only for the implementation of our NDCs, but also the wider just transition of our economies in the context of poverty alleviation, job creation, and sustainable development. In our view, the COP decision does not go far enough on the means of implementation issues. With regard to specifics, paragraph 36 of the draft CNA COP decision and paragraph 20 of 1 CP26 represents a particular problem for our country. This is because there can be no one-size-fits-all and selective approaches to the complex issue of energy transition. Selective references ignore the context of international equity and just transition nationally, the different national circumstances of parties, and the need for means of implementation support for developing countries that are trying to transition. These paragraphs need to include the conditionality of support by developed countries to developing countries for a just transition, and give developing countries parties space to pace their transitions in line with national circumstances and the availability of resources. On Article 6, we join others in urging a constructive resolution. With other African countries, we look forward to a positive outcome on Article 6.2 as the only predictable, reliable, and sustainable source of adaptation financing. Finally, Mr. President, we hope we will soon have sight of your report regarding the way forward with regard to the issue of Africa's special needs and circumstances. South Africa remains committed to working with you and with all other parties to ensure a positive outcome of COP26. I thank you.
Thank you, South Africa, for your intervention. I now give the floor to Brazil. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank once again the constructive engagement of our fellow delegates over the past 2 weeks here in Glasgow. Today is a key day when we have the opportunity to shift gears towards implementation mode of the Paris Agreement, of the Paris Agreement. Brazil arrived at this COP ready for more. We updated our NDC to reflect the urgency that is required to address climate change, according to the insights we have from the IPCC. We have engaged intensely with our partners to build a common solution to our common challenge, Brazil is part of this effort and remains committed to this regime. We have therefore also high expectations, not only that others are able to do the same in their education plans, but also in their financial plans, in accordance with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, which is enshrined in the UN frequency that was born in Brazil almost 30 years ago. We need also to conclude the rulebook if we wish to have enhancing action being undertaken. The word of NDCs is still not the word of 1.5 degrees. We need additional action in a way that delivers the results we want, the way we want, the way we need. Article 6, in that sense, has an important role to play in complementing public action, and we expect it to fulfill its mandate within the Paris Agreement in a way that is transparent, inclusive, and mindful of national circumstances, different national circumstances. We do not want small diamond clubs. We want a big community that shares our concerns and willingness to move ahead. Brazil has been working to bridge extreme positions to unlock the full potential of cooperative approach under Article 6. We have spent the past years and months refining our understanding and discussing the elements that would allow not only for different concerns to be accommodated, but also for the instruments under Article 6 to be promptly implemented in a way that can generate trust to all interested stakeholders that they are welcome to contribute in the efforts against climate change in a trustworthy manner. We are almost there, but we are not there yet. We are concerned that the latest texts still have two packages of options. One will not lead us where we want to. One can provide for a clear-cut process to implement Article 6 as fast as possible, ensuring environmental integrity and increasing ambition, and the other won't. We support once again a package based on the options A in the latest draft text to be the basis of the operation of cooperative approaches to the near future. We also support that both instruments under Article 6 can contribute substantially to adaptation finance. We urge our partners to work with us to land this and start implementing the Paris Agreement. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Brazil, for your intervention. I now give the floor to the
Thank you, Mr. President. I join others in commending your leadership over the past 2 weeks. Getting to Glasgow, like many of us in this room, have been a long, difficult, challenging journey, especially coming from Tuvalu, which is across the globe from Glasgow. However, the Prime Minister and I accepted the invitation to come to Glasgow because we had high hopes. We had high optimism that Glasgow will be the defining COP, that Glasgow will deliver action on our fight against climate change. In the first 2 days of the World Leaders Summit, we heard the passion, the commitment, and the pledges of our world leaders. That was encouraging, and it gave us that level of optimism. However, since that time, and through the corridors of this marvelous facility, and in the negotiating groups, we are not seeing that level of optimism being translated as we now see in the common decisions before us. So, friends, Tuvalu is a low-lying atoll nation, like many of the small island developing states. We are at the forefront of the climate change. It is an existential threat now. As Senator Perry from the US has said, it is not fiction, it is not projected to happen in the future. Our land is fast disappearing. Tuvalu is literally sinking. We must take action now. So, across the thematic areas of mitigation, adaptation, and climate finance, we would like to propose stronger language to raise the level of ambition. Under mitigation, a stronger focus and language on the decarbonization and the transformation to greener economy. Under adaptation, we would like to see a stronger focus on the doubling of climate finance for adaptation. And I echo the comments and sentiments by the Honorable Gentleman from Kenya. It's one thing on pledging climate finance. And for us, the smaller and developing states, we are struggling to even access those facilities. So we need to ensure that the financial mechanism and the modality of delivery is able to provide that support to communities and to countries which need the support now. Under loss and damage, we are encouraged by the recognition of the slow onset events, which for us is critical to getting that support to protect our land and our islands and our culture and identity from disappearing from birth. But we would like a stronger language under loss and damage or a dedicated financing facility. And I am encouraged by the comments made earlier this afternoon from Canada, Norway, European Union, about a stronger focus on loss and damage. But that is not translated into the competition. That's the second part of it. So I urge, friends, we need to deliver and take action now. This is a defining moment in Glasgow. And so, Mr. President, with your able leadership, we count on you. And we urge everyone to deliver and take action now. It's a matter of life and survival for many of us. And we implore that Glasgow must be the defining moment. And we must not fail. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for that intervention. I now give the floor to Ecuador. Ecuador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very happy to come after these moving interventions. In any case, I join others in commending you first of all for leadership, the team, your regional ambassadors, your chief negotiator, secretariat, and of course the ministers and acting facilitators for these last days. The new version indeed is much better. Our statement to the board, as I said, is reflected on the COP26 draft and the cover decisions, the other two cover decisions. And with that, I think it is indeed a very much improved text that we can work with. Just some reflections on how to shape until the end of these last hours that we have ahead of us and deliver what the world is expecting from us. In that regard, for a country like Ecuador, responsible for only 0.16% of the global emissions, the reference that you introduced very clearly in the beginning of the text, COP26, to multilateralism is fundamental for us. The multilateralism needs to be reinvigorated that COVID-19 showed that we need. This is the only way for us to overcome global challenges, global threats such as the one of climate change. But that multilateralism is needed not only to achieve certain goals, to achieve certain purposes, targets, but in this case we have an architecture already built for so many years, and we have to respect and avoid rewriting, but on the contrary, use that multilateralism to accelerate the implementation of the convention, the Paris Agreement on the basis of principles and objectives, including, of course, the CBDR in the context of sustainable development and the efforts to eradicate poverty. We also commend you for having introduced in the preamble part our decision. There were clear references to the Paragraph 11 of the Paris Agreement, particularly human rights, rights of indigenous peoples, migrants, children, persons with disabilities, and people in vulnerable situations in general. We also welcome very much the interlinkage that you introduced to the global crisis, climate change, and biodiversity loss. The importance of ensuring the integrity of all ecosystems, including forests, oceans, and the protection of biodiversity. And the recognition that some of our countries, we do, in our case, including the constitutional level, the Mother Earth and the rights of nature. We also know the importance of some of the concepts of climate justice. Going to the specifics on the finance, we welcome some of the improvements in the language, but we also still believe, particularly in adaptation finance, an improvement could be done to have specific reference to double adaptation finance with the aim to ensure the balance between mitigation and adaptation. On mitigation, we think also it's very important that there are some clear references to linked lateral action this decade on the basis of the best available science, and also to reflect CBDR perspective abilities and the context of sustainable development and efforts to eradicate poverty. Nevertheless, the same context should be introduced when we talk about the 1.5 goal and the actions that are required in that regard. And vision is needed, and it has been said very clearly by many, not only on action in terms of mitigation, but also action in terms of adaptation, and of course to support regarding finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. On finance, in general, we also think it's very important the references to the gap in the global goal of 100 billion per year, but we are certainly not comfortable with the linkage between the urge of developed countries to fulfill that promise through 2025. There is a gap, and if we all recognize that there is a gap, then the call should be to deliver on that goal as soon as possible, as it was said in the formulas, the day, if not the day after that, and if not the day after that, not through 2025 or until 2025, that will be, of course. Nevertheless, very important references, and we welcome that specifically to SDRs as another channel to provide mobilization and concession of financial resources and other forms of support. Loss and damage, the different statements from colleagues from AOSIS, RBCs, and other ministers have said very clearly that we need to support the proposal that has been made by the G7 and China. Last night we stayed until very late, hoping to have a final agreement, and we were very, very disappointed to hear some attempts to change or transfer the responsibility to respond to the needs on finance loss and damage towards humanitarian aid, charity institutions, international institutions. Finally, on the collaboration, we very much welcome the references to oceans and climate change action. This is very much in line with a commitment or an announcement that our head of state had the honor to make here in the first day of COP regarding the establishment of the new marine industry area in the Galapagos, and also the adoption of the joint declaration of the biological marine corridor in Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama. That shows already that we came here not only to recognize that leaders, but to provide some concrete options, alternatives, and measures to enhance the responses to both climate change and biodiversity. We finally have some special recognition to the references to youth, gender, and the human rights and conditions people. We join the call that is in paragraph 56 to everyone, to all the parties and all stakeholders to engage in the second 3-year work plan of the Local Communities Indigenous People Platform 2022 and 2024 that we humbly had the honor to contribute as part of the working facilitated working group. Article 6 outside of the decision for us is to deliver on the system that allows everyone to provide a robust, enhanced action to implement the disease and enhance their climate action. However, those mechanisms, the rules and the MPGs of those mechanisms have to allow the participation of all the countries. They have to provide a channel of additional finance to adaptation through the SOP on Article 6.2, the recognition of avoidance, as has been clearly stated, and the support is made by the Philippines in that regard, and also the proposal that we made to establish under 6.4 independent grievance mechanisms with full access to parties and those stakeholders to have access and appeal the decisions of the Supreme Court and raise grievances. With all these comments, we just reiterate our full support to you, to your presidencies, to the other parties to have and reach a final consensus on these final areas and to have a successful outcome of this COP, not only for the sake of the process, but for the present and future generations, our children, our grandchildren, for the most vulnerable people. There are the real victims of this global threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ecuador, for that intervention. I now call on Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Environmental Integrity Group, comprising Georgia, Washington State, Mexico, Monaco, the Republic of Korea, and Switzerland. From the outset, we stated that our success at this COP will be measured by the strength of our outcomes in 3 areas: rules, finance, and ambition. So the cover decision must set a strong signal for ambitious action on mitigation, adaptation, and the means of implementation. The current draft does not live up to our expectations. Let me highlight a few elements. The statement should highlight the importance of science. Science has to be the basis of our work and provide the orientation where we have to go. We need to better understand the interlinkages with nature, oceans, the planet, and tipping points. Critical information to our decision-making process. The language of long-term strategies should be stronger, consistent with the 1.5 target. Moreover, countries should explain how their NDCs are in line with 1.5 work program should have a clear and strong mandate to focus on 1.5. We need to emphasize priorities to scale up adaptation action, to enhance adaptive capacity and reduce vulnerability to climate change. Public finance is essential to guaranteeing the means of implementation for ambitious climate action. But private finance also plays a critical role, and we must provide the right incentives. Effective climate policy is central to protecting human rights, and the protection of human rights is central for effective climate policy. As many other parties have already mentioned, we must ensure that all climate action respects, promotes, and takes into consideration human rights, gender equality, indigenous people's rights, and intergenerational equity. No voice should be left unheard. And finally, climate change is about the future of today's youth. Therefore, we should establish an annual climate forum to enrich all youth. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mexico, for your intervention. I now call on Panama. Panama, you have the floor.
Senor Presidente, distinguished colleagues, firstly, Panama would like to associate itself with the statements delivered by Guinea on behalf of the G77 China, Peru on behalf of Ireland. Additionally, we align with the intervention made by the Dominican Republic and PNG on behalf of the Coalition of Rainforest Issues regarding forest actions and red laws. Mr. President, we appreciate your hard work in bringing forward a good and balanced text which serves as a solid basis for negotiation. We must deliver, and we believe that we are close to deliver. However, the text has really improved, but we must strive for more. Panama's ambition rises from a level of vulnerability, but also from the fact that we are a carbon negative nation. Even though we're carbon negative, we need to do more, and we believe everybody needs to do more if the survival of humankind is our ultimate objective. Regarding the phase out of coal and fossil fuels, it is sad to see that the current text is weaker than the previous one. Panama would like to echo the voices of youth, scientists, and civil society. We must keep them in the ground. Let's keep them in the ground. Mr. President, the current text does not allow us to keep them in the ground. Secondly, we must keep 1.5 alive. That is the main goal of this conference. If we do not achieve this, we will fail, this conference will fail, and the world as a whole will fail. But in order to keep 1.5 alive, we must ensure that the goal to reduce 45% of emissions by 2030 is part of the final version of this text. If we recognize the best available science, we will take a step forward and we will send the right message to the market. Mr. President, we must move. Moreover, we support the statement given by Korea regarding the EU forum. We appreciate the current language of the government decisions to include youth in climate action, especially in decision making. It is outrageous that the current text does not recognize the importance of international collaboration to understand and address the implications of climate change for global health. This must be a part of the final version. Furthermore, we welcome the recognition and support of the work of the Island champions in the inclusion of non-state actors for the enhancement of climate action. They have done an outstanding job and they must be recognized. Additionally, we appreciate the welcoming of the important summary on the ocean and climate change dialogue, as well as the invitation to integrate and strengthen ocean-based measures in climate action. In terms of Article 6, we strongly believe that the previous efforts of rainforest nations like mine must be recognized, but the current text of Article 6.2 does not provide this assurance. We must assure this in order to move forward. Let me be clear, Mr. President, for Panama, this is a must. Now on loss and damage, we must deliver finance and technical assistance. We believe that we must agree on a platform that is going to truly help the ones suffering the adverse impacts of climate change in the front lines, especially when adaptation is not an option anymore. Therefore, I really ask my development colleagues to align their thinking, because right now it's very confusing. If one hand in this room, they just claim to understand that the climate crisis is real and that it's impacting the most vulnerable, but in another hand, to refuse funding for the people at the front lines. Mr. President, I simply cannot square that circle, and I simply cannot understand your thinking. I just want to remind everybody that the most vulnerable communities did not cause this crisis, but they are paying the highest price. We must deliver for them. This God must deliver for them. The President, everything that we're asking for was already agreed by all of us in 1992. Well, I guess it was agreed by you and all my colleagues because my negotiators and I were going to be around. I want to remind this room that the average age of the permanent negotiator at this club is 29 years old, and 65% of our negotiators are young, impressive, and capable women. I guess what I'm trying to say is that our demands are fully in line with the objective of the convention, which seeks to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. But we have doubled emissions in the past 30 years, and the least responsible are suffering. Colleagues, all we're asking you to do is to keep your promises and own your responsibilities on setting this crisis in motion. Nothing less, nothing more. Mr. President, in 2015, we had 91 repairs. The agreement is all about raising the bar to deliver for current and future generations. All parties asking you, your team, and our colleagues is to keep that market alive. Leaders do not settle for anything less than 105. Leaders defend people and biodiversity above profits and politics. Leaders present pledges that actually get us to real zero. Leaders bring youth from all genders, indigenous peoples, and the most marginalized communities to the table where their future is being negotiated, just as Panama has done. Leaders see the response of COVID-19 as the single greatest generation of opportunity for climate action and economic justice. Mr. President, 1.5 is not a choice. It is a necessity. It is a moral obligation. It is a lifeline. And in order to do that, fossil fuels must be kept in the ground. So, Mr. President, let's keep them in the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pamela, for your intervention. And now give the floor to Ghana.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ghana associates itself with the G77 plus China and the views as initiated by the delegate from the Republic of Kenya. Mr. President, my intervention is premised on one principle, that the present generation has rented this planet from the future generation, and we must ensure that we preserve it and deliver it to posterity from the rented generation. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, this is a moral obligation. It is an ethical issue, and everything that I'm saying is preconditioned on this. Mr. President, if I may take more into specifics, Ghana is concerned with the discussions on Article 6, especially on the subject of the share of proceeds. This is critical for Ghana to enable us trading the needed support for implementation of our updated NDCs. Mr. President, a clear roadmap for delivery of adaptation goal is critical to enable countries like Ghana to cope with the shocks of climate change. Mr. President, finance is very, very critical here. And developed countries must be seen to be making good on their pledges. Small emitters like Ghana will continue to do We will continue to do our bit as expected, and we shall continue to upgrade into high ambition in tandem with the big players. But we suspect that, or we demand that they also up their ambitions. Mr. President, we expect great leadership that demonstrates seriousness towards solving the problems. The principle of common but differentiated responsibility must be reflected in the text in this entirety. We are hopeful that this COP will be successful under your leadership, and also join my colleagues in thanking you for steering conference thus far. And we are waiting the final outcome to make us all take smiles to our various countries. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you, Dana, for that introduction. I now call Nicaragua to the floor. Nicaragua, you have the floor.
Mr. President, our speaker is coming back in a second. I appreciate if you can talk after the next country, please.
Of course. I give the floor to the Maltese.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, the Maldives has fully supports the statements made by the OCs, and I also echo the sentiments made by my colleague from Tuvalu. We have spent over 2 weeks in Glasgow to discuss ways to resolve the climate crisis. Me and my small delegation from the Maldives have sat in rooms, listening to disagreements on commas, full stops, and words. For small island states, these are debates on the words to describe how quickly we will succumb to the climate emergency. For decades, we have been trying to impress upon world leaders where we are headed. We did not cause the climate crisis. That day is already here, and the science backs us up. Our islands are eroding and flooding more frequently. Our reefs are weakening, while the salt water encroaches further and further. Hurricanes, cyclones, tidal swells are more frequent than ever. We are losing family, friends, and loved ones to extreme weather events. Afterwards, we are forced to close our schools, health centers, and thousands are left without safe homes. The impact of the climate crisis is very real on our development, our well-being, and our ability to envision a future in our homes. It affects our security. It is becoming more challenging to govern because of the constant need to reprioritize national budgets, fund emergency relief and urgent adaptation needs, to protect our islands and to provide safe water and shelter. This is an everyday battle for many islands and vulnerable countries. If we commit all our national resources, the Maldives won't be able to do this alone. The Maldives has received approval for 2 projects from the GCF. It's not easy for me to express these sentiments. It's disheartening to know the kind of bureaucracy that we have been asked to realize a project from concept to its approval and inception. It took us years to access these funds. For one project, we were asked to provide scientific proof dating back 30 years that our islands are actually eroding and losing land due to impacts of climate change. Mr. President, the science is so clear that BCC has reaffirmed it. We cannot put our survival as collateral. We don't think it is unreasonable to ask to help us to adapt to these changes. We don't think it is unreasonable to ask for adequate, predictable, and sustainable help and access to education finance. The sincerity of the high-level appearances and ambitious statements we have heard over the last few days, specifically from G20 countries, needs to be reflected in the text. In 18 months, the world spent trillions to to respond to the pandemic. In the same period, the world has spent trillions on fossil fuels. Clearly, money is not the problem. Excellencies, according to the most trusted science, the IPCC report, we need to halve our emissions by 2030 to limit the temperatures to 1.5. We need to see a balance in access to adaptation finance. Treat the climate crisis like an emergency. We have only 98 months to do it, and I think we can do this. Thank you.
Well, I want to tell you something opportunity time.
Thank you, Maurice, for your intervention. I now give the floor to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity. I'm speaking on behalf of the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Environment of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Mr. Chair, the Democratic Republic of Congo would like to acknowledge and thank you for the work done by the presidency and for the effort made by every delegation. On the issue of the 2020 verdicts, we have two seats: the Clean Development Mechanism and the Red Plus. Following the Paris Agreement, Red Plus verdicts have been issued under COP, and with the effective measurement routine and verification modality. Reference emission levels have been defined and safeguard guidance maintained. Mr. Chair, we can't have a situation where regular price credits and the work done for many years by this country are not recognized. We therefore support the single date for both the Clean Development Mechanism and Red Plus. This is more important for our country, for the Congo, for all Red Plus countries, and for all the world. Thank you very much, Mr.
President. Thank you to the Democratic Republic of Congo for that intervention. I now give the floor to Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. President. Argentina will have the honor to speak on behalf of the ALDE group. We welcome the efforts made by the UK presidency to advance the text. Dear colleagues, we are the final hours of this conference. COP26 must send strong signals that are in line with the ambition that is needed to achieve the goals set in the UN 2% and Paris Agreement. We welcome that we are all working so hard on making this COP, the COP of raising ambition, and more important, the COP for enabling action. There is no better ambition than concrete action. Action to limit emissions, action to adapt to climate change, action to reduce vulnerabilities, and action to safeguard the lives of those already suffering the worst consequences of climate change. Therefore, ambition must be raised in a balanced manner, because the Paris Agreement must be operationalized, considering mitigation, adaptation, and mix of implementation, reflecting the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in the light of different national circumstances. We should not level down. On the contrary, we must level up. We all agree. We all want to keep 1.5 alive. And in that regard, we recall Article 2, Paragraph 1 of the Paris Agreement that aims to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change in the context of sustainable development and efforts to eradicate poverty. And specifically on its point C, on the need to make finance flows consistent in the pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. We need to estimate the costs of implementation of the ADC, assess the traditional and innovative means of implementation, and devise a roadmap in order to ensure enabling conditions for climate action in the context of a just transition. In this sense, it is necessary to reach a decision on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance at this COP, and to move forward in a definition on Article 6 to make use of every tool available while ensuring environmental integrity. In that regard, we support the G77 plus China position on the share of proceeds for adaptation. We also support a package based on option A and welcome the Glasgow Committee on Non-Market Approaches. We look forward to a resolution today for all pending issues on this matter, which has been open for 6 years now. We are disappointed with the fact that many of our concerns and the concerns of many other developing countries were not considered in the current decision. The current decision must reflect stronger ambition in terms of adaptation and in particular in terms of means of implementation to ensure that we can actually operationalize what we all very much aspire to. A swift economic recovery after COVID pandemic aligned with the Paris Agreement and the promotion of a new era of integral and sustainable development for all. We are all suffering the consequences of climate change. We are all vulnerable to climate change, and we need solutions that fit all. We should not repeat the same mistakes as in Copenhagen. We count on you to engage all parties, especially in developed countries, on a concrete proposal up to the challenge that allows us fast progress and resolutions. Time is running out, and the world is waiting for our urgent action. Let's not waste time on this critical day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Argentina, for that intervention. I now give the floor to Nicaragua.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the presentations. For the time, will be very brief. Mr. Chair, Nicaragua recognizes your excellent work. Of course, many things about that. We want to be very proud and very different. Adaptation is insufficient, but to add that with the impact and effect that with the climate crisis. In this regard, we need to put loss and damage to the same level of adaptation and mitigation through the workshop and Santiago Temple. I want to say again, it's a very emphasize again, we need to put loss and damage to the same level and adaptation and mitigation. And thank you.
Thank you, Nicaragua, for your intervention. The final part of the speech will be Renata. Renata, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to start by thanking you and your team for your tireless work over these past days, weeks, and months. Renata associates herself with a statement from AOSIS. Mr. President, I've had the benefit of sitting in the facilitation rooms, hearing all the groups and many parties over many, many hours, talking about collective priorities around ambition. What we see before us now in the text reflects the desire for ambition and a balanced outcome, and it supports the elements we need to see to keep 1.5 alive. But the text we have before us is the bare minimum. The bare minimum. If we reduce any element of the mitigation text, we can say goodbye to keeping 1.5 alive. Importantly, the text recognizes that we have no time to waste. that our work on ratcheting up ambition continues immediately. This is the critical decade, but to get where we need in 2030, the next 12 months are crucial. We need to further strengthen our 2030 targets next year in 2022, so that we're in line with 1.5 and with a pathway to net zero. There has been some opposition to compromise cover decision text drawn from G20 declaration language. This text provides good solutions for finding balance in the text. I strongly urge parties to accept this text as the way forward. We've heard the importance of delivering on the 3 pillars of ambition: mitigation, adaptation, and finance. If mitigation is the marathon, adaptation is the sprint. We need adaptation finance to be scaled up urgently and made more accessible and predictable. The language in paragraph 18 of the CMA cover decision on doubling adaptation finance and moving towards a balance is a critical step forward. We warmly welcome the language on special drawing rights and the opportunity that this presents. This has the potential to bring additional finance flows to support the climate agenda for vulnerable countries. It provides a creative and doable solution that, if supported by donors and institutions, can move the finance needle. Key elements of the Paris Agreement rulebook remain in the balance. Finalization of the Paris rulebook must support and not undermine keeping 1.5 within reach. Under Article 6, we must move beyond offsetting. OMG must be applied through a mandatory cancellation at issuance with a substantial cancellation rate. On loss and damage, the text is underdone. We need to see more out of this COP than what is in what is in the text currently in the Santiago network and a workshop. The workshop should at least be a work program. We need stronger language. We also need to take bolder steps forward here and now for new and additional finance for addressing loss and damage. Finally, Grenada supports the references to oceans and calls for the reinstatement of the references to nature-based solutions. The linkage between climate change and biodiversity is imperative. Colleagues, the world is watching and expects us to do the right thing. And that is to close this COP with a truly ambitious outcome which keeps 1.5 alive. We cannot let them down. This is our last real chance. As we leave this plenary session and continue our deliberations to reach a final agreement, remember, history will judge us individually and collectively. Let us all deliver on keeping 1.5 alive. I thank you.
Thank you, Grenada, for your intervention. Friends, we've now had 38 parties who have been able to participate in this plenary, and I thank all of you for your interventions. My team and I have taken careful note of the comments and proposals, and of course we will continue to engage extensively with you over the course of today. And I encourage you to also reach out to one another to try and build a consensus. It is of course my hope that we will be able to find textual solutions for our outstanding issues quickly, and my intention is to publish clean versions of relevant text later today for parties' careful consideration and ultimately, I hope, adoption tonight. Now, we started the closing plenary yesterday. Part 2 of that will recommence at 5:30 today to continue the process of adopting a number of the already concluded items. whilst we continue our negotiations and try and resolve the outstanding issues. So I just want to be absolutely clear at 5:30. We will not be considering the cover decision or the text put out this morning. We will continue to discuss those. But we will then meet again for another informal stock-taking plenary later tonight on the broader set of outcomes that we have been discussing this afternoon. The time for this plenary will be announced later today, and I assure you that sufficient notice will be given to everyone. So friends, we need to all get back to work. Let us drive progress and forward consensus. As so many of you have said, the eyes of the world are on us. Thank you. I close this plenary.
Sorry? Postpone. Oh, yeah. It feels getting naive at this point. You know, to think it's going to close to 9.
By the way, I turned them on the
Should we go get Hannah ahead? What's a diplomatic question, right? So that means that basically